There have been some who oppose Bernie Sanders, whether on the left or on the right, who have noted certain similarities between his supporters and Donald Trump supporters. The single greatest one perhaps being an opposition to the established political authorities, although on different sides of the aisle, and believing that the economy is fundamentally rigged against them. But then there's this sort of implication that there might be more that ties them together. People saying that I've hung out at Donald Trump rallies and at Bernie Sanders rallies, and they're both just always so mad. And sometimes I can't tell the people who tweet apart from those two sides. And if you don't look at the actual data, you might think, in conjunction with like one poll that came out that said that some of them might vote for Donald Trump, that there are a lot of things that are unifying the supporters, which just seems crazy. When Bernie Sanders is tarnished as this crazy wide-eyed liberal, Donald Trump anything but we should assume that their supporters are very similar. Now, thankfully, Vox, who not necessarily generally big fans of Bernie Sanders, although they don't like Trump, have put together a list of some of the responses to poll questions on certain issues, and they've shown where the supporters of different candidates lie, and so it's an interesting way to compare them. So let's bring up this first one. You're going to see a wide variety of different topics there. I mean, things like whether immigrants are a burden on the country. Obviously, the Republicans' supporters much more likely to agree with that. And you see massive difference even amongst the supporters of the Republicans. Like Kasich supporters and Trump supporters are more different than Kasich supporters and Sanders supporters or Clinton supporters when it comes to their views of immigrants.
It's a lot of math, John.
There is a lot of math. Not too complicated. You don't need to do any trig or anything like that.
Your last word problem was burdensome. That was a burden on our country.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
The U.S. Muslims should be more subject to scrutiny. We've seen quotes from Ted Cruz and Donald Trump about that recently. Huge difference between the Republicans and Democrats. And again, in both of these cases, Donald Trump supporters, Bernie Sanders supporters are the farthest apart. There's even, in the U.S. Muslims, there's a 10-point gap between Bernie Sanders and Clinton supporters there. Now, you do see...
I find it shocking. Are you down to angry with the government there?
I find that fairly shocking, too.
Yeah, that only 30% of Ted Cruz's voters are angry with the government.
And he's the Tea Party guy.
Yeah, he is the
angriest person with the government. Well, by the way, only 13% of Sanders supporters.
Right.
Now, granted, when they think angry at the government, they may be thinking President Obama, the presidency. And look, while Hillary Clinton has tied herself more closely to Obama than Bernie Sanders has, the supporters, probably the people who voted for Obama in 2008, are probably slightly more likely to support Bernie Sanders this time around. Because I would imagine a lot of the people who are supporting Hillary Clinton probably also liked her in 2008. Mm-hmm. But anyway, not that mad there with the government. And you notice, by the way, if we can just briefly put that up, this is somewhat reassuring. In terms of the Social Security benefits not being reduced, people are fairly consistent on that.
Yeah.
They don't want those benefits reduced. And that's why it's scary when either Democrats or Republican politicians imply that that might have to happen.
Yeah, it's five. Yeah, all five candidates.
Look, and Trump supporters are the strongest against it. Although basically you're within the margin of error there.
But a lot of them are on Social Security too.
That's true as well. They do tend to be much older. Now, if we can jump ahead to this next one, you're going to see even more topics. Global involvement makes things worse. You see a pretty big difference actually between Clinton supporters and Sanders supporters. Almost as large as the difference more than the difference across the Republicans actually. Free trade is good for the U.S. Sanders supporters fairly split there, considering some of his messaging. If not,
yeah, that surprises me. I mean, it's a 10-point difference between good and bad with Bernie Sanders supporters.
Yeah, look, economic system favors powerful interests. Obviously, you would expect that would be the strongest position that Bernie Sanders supporters would take. Maybe something about money in politics. But Clinton supporters also largely agree with that, which is interesting. I liked this, by the way. Abortion should be legal in almost cases. I mentioned in a previous video that Cruz supporters, they're the bright red there. They are way more anti-abortion than Kasich or Trump supporters. Most Trump supporters, by the way, don't seem to agree with him on his position on abortion. And Sanders supporters are 6 points more in favor of abortion legality than Hillary Clinton supporters are, which is interesting. Yeah. Although that might simply be tied in with them being more liberal in general. And then also government's responsibility to ensure all have health care. That's something that Trump has said, although his health care plan that he put out doesn't actually back it up. His supporters do not agree with him on that. Yeah. Only 14% believe.
But also, and going back to the abortion, Democrats, religious Democrats, regular church-going Democrats, who are in favor of Hillary Clinton or in favor of Bernie Sanders Democrats, they are most likely to go for Hillary Clinton, the more religious Democrats right now, and they're the ones for whom abortion is not the #1 issue. So that's why. It doesn't
and you might be
surprise
getting
me.
just some like because of the
also the
Christianity
difference
socially.
6 points. It's pretty much the same.
Yeah, it's not massive or anything like that. I just thought that was somewhat interesting. And so, look, it's easy to say that in terms of some of the messaging or the overall theme, I would say with significant differences, there's some similarity between Bernie Sanders' message, Trump's message, that the system is rigged in some way. But they don't even agree with the way that it's rigged, although they are both against money in politics. Their solution is slightly different. And their solutions to the other issues in terms of ISIS, in terms of immigration, obviously as different as they could be.
Yeah.
I don't know that this sort of information will put to rest the idea that they're basically the same people, these supporters, but it should go hopefully a long way.
And also, just because you have similar strains within them doesn't make them all the same. I mean, it's this whole idea, they both are sort of outsiders. I mean, Bernie Sanders has been in Congress, as we know, for over 25 years, but he is taking an outsider's approach to this race, and so is Donald Trump. So the whole idea that, there's that they can have some similar strains, but on issues and on everything else in between, they don't agree at all.
Not yet, almost not at all.
They're taking a stand against the way Washington is run, and you're allowed to have that. That happens in every election.
That's true.
That was Howard Dean and Pat Buchanan running in the same year. It just hasn't happened with the same kind of charisma just yet until this year.
And in a lot of ways, in a lot of the areas that they do agree, all of the other candidates' supporters do tend to agree as well. I've heard a little bit less of this recently. The reason that it frustrated me was I didn't very often hear anybody on the right making the case. It tended to be, in my mind, people on the left who wanted a way to tarnish Sanders' supporters. And simply saying that there's something like him, that makes it then easier to stick accusations of them simply being misogynists or simply being racist or whatever in conjunction with some of the other messaging that was going on in this campaign. I think they saw that as a shortcut to making those accusations stick as well.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. That's speculation on my part, nothing but speculation.
Yeah, I'm going to challenge your speculation, but you did say it's only speculation, so
I've escaped then.
It's all yours.
Yeah.
You can have
Some
it.
in Washington
You can own it. Right. Some say, while others.
Yeah. And by the way, I love that was Trump's first attempted evasion. Some Republicans would say it should be banned.
Right.
Motherfucker, I'm talking to you.
He's talking about his Muslim friends. Name them, Don. Name
them.
Yeah.
Although he would let the rich ones in.